Hollow Knight, Soul and Magic, written by Uncharted Chip 38, Prologue, remastered. Some say that death is a peace most mortals have at the end of their life. For the knight, preventing the Shape Lord was a sacrifice worth achieving for Halanos. The absolute radiance was destroyed thanks to the aid of the Godseeker's power to summon the Shape Lord. Now the knight finds itself, with Grimkield, in Equestria, going through journeys with 6 of Equestria's best hopes to stop all evil. However, will they be able to help the knight go back home? What about its siblings? Did the Pale King also end up here? All questions the knight must find answers for while aiding its new home. The mind to think atop a spiral with a single platform stood a lonely figure with a laughable size. Around in the area was bright thanks to the large sun in the distance. Before it stood a bug embroidered with a lavish shell, judging it as this small figure faced towards the sun. Everything it had gone through came to this moment, but why was it here? The sun in the distance suddenly sprouted wings and began to fly towards the small figure. The little being was an odd-looking bug, wearing a grayish-black cloak and wielding a sharp nail. The area rumbled around this little bug, but this bug stood firm. Instead, it drew its weapon, ready to take on whatever was coming for it. A bright light flashed before a massive moth-like being, colored in glorious bright gray, roared above this bed. Without hesitation, this little being leapt up and slashed at the massive being facing it. The moth retaliated by sending several swords in various directions to squash this little pest. Without missing a beat, the little bug dodged and deflected any swords that would have been a fatal wound. The bug then let out a roar of its own, but a blast of pitch-black energy had struck them off guard with such intensity that made the entity angered. I will not be forgotten again. Several balls of pure, bright, yellow energy formed around the little creature before launching themselves at their attacker. The little bug temporarily turned into a pitch-black color and dashed into the air, going right through them. But it was not ready for a sudden beam of light to hit it, causing the bug's face to slightly crack. The bug got back up and fired another volley of pitch-black energy that caused the massive moth to stagger. It fell onto the platform with a sea of black rising to meet it, tendrils sprouting out and latching onto the moth. The moth's eyes glowed before dissipating into essence, traveling upward to stay away from the sea of void below. Several platforms materialized in front of the little bug, allowing the creature to hop upwards in pursuit of the massive moth. A beam of light came out of the heavens above and hit the bug traveling upward. Another crack formed on its shell, but it still pressed on. No will to break. The nicely engraved bug below just stared in awe as the battle continued, too enraptured by such a spectacle. How such a small creature could challenge something so massive and powerful but not be crushed by it. This was the life she was looking forward to for the longest time. The little bug reached the top where its enemy awaited him, more enraged that this thing could challenge its mighty strength. Several swords levitated on one side of the area and began making their way to the other. The bug jumped over them and struck them off with a few slashes before releasing a powerful slash that caused the great moth to retreat upward once more. More platforms appeared, the little bug using them to chase after the moth. Several lasers were fired down upon the small bug, one striking it and causing a heavy crack in the shell. Nevertheless, the bug proceeded up the platforms with a sea of void following it. No voice to cry suffering, there was nothing but 2 small platforms for the bug to fight them off guard. Heavily damaged was the shell, but the bug was not giving the zealous god its glory. With everything in its small frame, it threw its nail right at the moth, piercing the chest surprisingly easily. The moth let out a burst of light as the bug's shell cracked open with a sea of void covering the heavens. A single ball of void coming from the bug fell to the sea below, born of god and void tendrils of void gripped them off guard as it did not have the strength to resist the pull. Wide eyes opened to reveal the sinister end to the god of light. For the long life that this being has had, it feared the very existence of its ancient enemy. Blab, putrid, sharp claws gripped the face of the moth before tearing it to pieces. With all 4 of its skeleton-like arms, it slashed at the moth until it was reduced to essence. Said essence soon being consumed by the entity Uzid roared triumphantly for destroying its ancient rival. The decorated bug that had watched the fight saw waterfalls of void come down from the heavens, swallowing the nearby areas quickly. Not fear, but in awe was this bug, staring at the fight above it. Then the void creature came down, wrapping tendrils around it in a sinister embrace, but the bug could only let out a sound of awe. Then, the void consumed her. Elsewhere in a place full of junk and water, left to rot without care, was a massive bug wearing a golden mask similar to the bug recently consumed by the void. However, the eye sockets of the mask leaped out streams of void as the creature seemed to be fighting or allowing the void to consume it. The creature looked at a pale flower, so delicate, so small, as more void streams came out of its eyes. Tendrils began to form out of them, inducing such agonizing pain to the bug as the flower glowed brighter. The void spilled out faster in response as if it knew what the flower was attempting to do. It would not be denied the victory it had achieved after facing its enemy for eons of time. It would not be denied its right to consume what was rightful theirs. After glowing bright, while the bulb began to dim so dark, both the bug and the flower dissipated into white essence, stopping any more void from leaking out. Thus, it was done, or was it? Wake. 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 The small bug suddenly shot up as it had found itself unconscious on a cold brick floor. In front of it was some sort of vampire bug that was a tad smaller than the little bug. It made an unknown cry that only the little bug knew well, and it would have given it a grateful smile if it could. The bug got up and patted the red-eyed moth on the head before looking around. It was dark, but not dark enough to need a lantern. It was nighttime thanks to the open ceiling and destroyed sections of this place. The stars were full in view, which puzzled the bug very much since back at Dartmouth, its temporary home, the stars were very faint to see. There was no ground to block the sight and to only make the bug stare in awe. Then it felt a tug from its companion, having the nail that the bug had used in its previous fight in its mouth. It took the nail and gave a nut before walking around. Where was the moth that it was fighting? Where was the embroidered bug that was observing the fight? Where was the tug of destiny to lead the bug on its journey? Where was the pale light of the pale king that led it to defeating the threat once and for all? Where were the siblings that once helped it form the void entity? As the bug began to think, it began to realize something was wrong. It shouldn't have the ability to think at all, so why was it able to? Was this death? If it was, wouldn't the void consume it and make it a shade of itself? Feeling for its shell, it hit the familiar hard surface with no cracks from the battle. This must be what death was like. Yet, it was made to be unable to think. Could death have broken one of the Pale King's machinations put upon the vessels? Naya? The fly and bug asked, but it shrugged, unsure how to answer this load of questions while they clearly were in the previous fight. Although the red-eyed moth was not in the actual battle, it was still a part of the bug before it. A long quest with the father that involved killing said father for the child to grow. It was not an easy fight, but it was done without question. A ritual of fire and brick. The bug took several steps through a destroyed wall, finding a forest that looked thick and darker than the structure. Not a good place to go to for the average bug, but this bug had no fear. It continued into the forest, hearing the small sounds of tiny bugs and even the rustling of bushes. At one point, a much taller creature, made of wood, attacked from the bushes, but one simple slash cut the beast down. For something of great size yet died so easily was pitiful. The bug proceeded into a clearing where it found the stars shine the brightest. Looking up, there was one particular star that shone much brighter than the others. Too bright for even the bug to look at. But, then its vision began to blur, an overwhelming sense of fatigue before the bug collapsed. The moth instantly went to its master's side, trying to wake it as it feared the creatures that laid in wait. It wasn't as powerful as its caretaker, nor could it defeat the vast enemies its masters faced on its long journey. How could it fend for itself if its master were to die in nature right now? Its answer was something much taller than both of them standing over. The creature looked up and read before it too suddenly felt fatigued and lay down on the ground. A shadow looming over them as whatever forced them to sleep would last quite a while. The figure noted a small bushel of pale flowers nearby that had not been there before. It had seen this forest many times and knew every little nook and crack within the thick trees. Where had this bush appeared from? Was the sister involved with this new plant? Perhaps the student would like to investigate what the sunflower was made of to see if it could be used for medicinal properties. But for now, a small shimmer came over the unconscious bugs as they began to levitate and follow the moving figure. Wherever they were going, it would be not what they had seen in Hellenist. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video,